Okay, let's make a start. The simplest mode of spider pack operation is the dairy pack, so called because it is suitable for the relatively short cross fences that dairy farmers use to split up their permanent paddocks. The dairy pack starter kit contains enough material to build a 150 metre fence on average terrain. The starter kit comprises a cattle tread-in kit, which contains 12 standard cattle tread-ins in kit set form, a spool wound with 150 metres of Kiwitech polywire with a short insulating cord attached, this interesting looking gadget which is called a release hook, and a snap-in handle. In the long box containing the tread-in kit, we find the 9mm by 1 metre fiberglass shafts, the standard pedal with steel pin, and the single wedge used for attaching the pedal to the shaft. This has 9mm engraved on the inside and has a single stripe down the flat surface. We also have the clip body and the double wedge used for attaching the clip to the shaft. This also has 9mm engraved on the inside, but has 3 stripes down the back. Let's put the tread-ins together. The first step is to attach the pedals to the shaft. Thread the pedal onto the shaft and then align the thick end of the wedge with the red mark on the fiberglass shaft and press the pedal onto the wedge. If you have very soft ground, you could set the pedal a little higher to get more grip. Or if you have very hard or stony ground, set it lower so the tread-in is easier to plant. But remember, it's the fiberglass shaft that stops the tread-in from twisting in the ground. Preload all your pedals and then lock them on like this. Set the bottom of the shaft on a wooden buffer and drive the pedal onto the wedge. Try to strike the pedal as close to the shaft as you can and leave a little of the wedge protruding from the bottom. Now for the clips. Push the double wedge through the clip body and thread both parts onto the shaft like this. The double wedge clip self-locks in both directions and has a neutral zone in the middle where it is movable on the shaft. And see how I apply equal pressure with both my thumb and forefinger to keep the two parts in that central neutral position. It helps when you're adjusting a clip to swivel both parts on the shaft, and that also helps to unjam a clip that is locked on. For reasons you'll see shortly, it's very important that the clip is set on the opposite side of the shaft to the pedal and give it a pull upwards to lock it in place. While we're on the subject of clips, you can also use the same single wedge as we used with the pedal to attach the clip body to the shaft. And the best way to load a single wedge clip is to drive the wedge into the body using a blunt, heavy blade. As you can see, this locks the clip very firmly to the shaft, which is essential for some other modes of spider pack operation. Despite the fact that you need a tool to reset the clip, some farmers prefer this, and you can get single wedge cattle tread-in kits, although the double wedge is the standard version. Let's have a look at the release hook. The release hook has arms, legs, buttons and lugs. The lugs are for a special function not utilised by the dairy pack, but since we're having a close look, you can see that there are symbols engraved on the top, which are instructions for another mode of spider pack use. We use the buttons and arms for attaching a spool to a steel wire fence. And when not in use, the release hook is stored in one of these pockets in the spool. Push it in legs first, with the arms towards the outside of the spool. Push it home and make sure that these little teeth are behind this ridge, which stops the release hook from falling back out of the pocket. To get it out, we push it on through, and we rest our thumb half on the spool, half on the release hook, so that our thumb doesn't crash when the release hook suddenly pops through. Spider pack spools come as bare spools or pre-wound with 150, 200, 300 or 400 metres of polywire, although only the 150 metre spool has this length of insulating cord attached. 450 metres is really the maximum workable amount of polywire you can fit on a spool. The snap-in handle snaps into one of these holes on either side of the spool. To remove it, hold the spool firmly, pull and press at the same time with your thumb. A new snap-in handle is a bit hard to get out at first, although it soon frees up. There is a spare shank stored inside the handle of the snap-in handle. To replace it, use the spool as a rest and drive the handle onto the shank. Take care to strike the handle squarely and never use a hard hammer on a plastic part. Always use a wooden buffer. Right, let's go and put up a fence. For the sailors amongst you, the best knot to secure the end of a temporary fence is a full round turn, and note that means passing the cord around the wire twice, and a slip hitch. The knot is easy to tie and quick to undo. With a little bit of practice, you can even tie onto a live wire without getting a shock. At this stage, it's best to carry your snap-in handle in your pocket. With the spool on the ground, take a tread-in and push the clip through the middle of the spool. It helps to rest the spool on your foot and expect a little bit of resistance as the clip only just goes through. Tuck the tread-in carrying the spool under your left arm and make sure that the lugs on the clip are pointing upwards. And let the spool hang well down in front of you, not up here like this. And note how I rest this tread-in on my left hand with these fingers free to deal with the other tread-ins. These are tucked under my other arm, rest over the top of the first tread-in with the pedals at the front. Now face your destination across the other side of the paddock and choose a specific target that you can keep in sight most of the time. You will want to use as few tread-ins as possible, planting them only where required. And with a single wire on flat ground, you can probably stretch out to about 25 metre spacings. So that you can keep a straight line and study the terrain in front in order to choose your tread-in positions, it's a big help if we can clip onto the polywire without looking at what we are doing. The best way to do this is to follow a series of precise steps like a military drill. This technique soon becomes second nature and is common to nearly all modes of spider pack operation. It looks simple, but most people find that it takes a little time to master, so let's go carefully through the steps. Grab your first tread-in about 15 centimetres below the clip and point it out in the direction of 2 o'clock. Make sure that the pedal is pointing down, which means the lugs on the clip are pointing up. Scoop the clip and shaft under the polywire and lift the tread-in up towards your chin, which forces the polywire to slide over the shaft. Push out in the direction of 2 o'clock, which forces the polywire against the clip. Make a slow quarter turn clockwise, which allows the polywire to slide into the clip. An anti-clockwise turn to secure it in there, and then without changing your grip, drop the tread-in down and wrap it in vigorously with your heel. It's important to keep moving throughout the operation, as that helps the polywire slide into the clip. So we'll just go through it again. Out towards 2 o'clock, under and up towards your chin, out to 2 o'clock again, clockwise turn, anti-clockwise turn, bang, bang. Out, under, up, out, turn, turn. Keeping your eyes on the target and moving throughout the operation. The Spider Pack tread-in pedal is made of glass reinforced nylon and is very strong, so you're quite safe to wrap it into the ground with a vigorous stamp of your heel. Don't get in the habit of pressing it in with the ball of your foot, as in hard ground it will tend to wobble and buckle. When you get to within a few metres of your target, unload the spool by holding it down with your foot and pulling on the tread-in. Run the spool through your fingers to gauge the polywire tension and bring the spool up to the fence with the polywire feeding in to the top of the spool. Snap the release hook out of the pocket of the spool and with the arms uppermost, snap it into an appropriate pair of holes on the perimeter of the spool. Tip the spool on its side and hook the upper arm over the steel wire. Tip the spool back to vertical and with a sliding and twisting action, snap the second arm onto the wire. You could leave it like that, or if you want to power up the poly wire, rotate the spool twice around the steel wire, and note how I direct the poly wire out to one side to keep it away from the release hook. To remove it, just reverse the steps. Around twice, and again I will use a sliding and twisting action to snap the first arm off the wire. If you are protected from shocks by a good pair of insulating boots, there is an alternative method of attaching the spool. Pass the complete spool around the wire twice. Adjust the tension and wind the slack onto the spool. And in this case, we're going to use the release hook to stop the spool from unwinding. This method is especially good in very windy environments. Right, let's take the fence down. Take the spool off, release hook back into its pocket, spool around the wire twice. And now for the really high-tech part of the operation. We're going to wind in the poly wire as we walk down the line, collecting the tread-ins as we go. To wind clockwise is the natural way for right-handers. So hold the spool on its side in front of you, with the poly wire leading in to the left-hand side, and snap your snap-in handle into one of the holes on the underside of the spool. We're going to wind with an orbital winding action, with the spool spinning around the shank of the snap-in handle. It's best to practice with a full spool before you start. If you keep the spool in a more or less horizontal plane, there is a very low energy input and you can actually wind quite quickly. But when you practice, just see how slow you can go. Note, it is an orbital motion in a constant plane, not a wrist wobble. There is one critical objective with orbital winding, and that is to synchronize your winding and walking speeds. The best approach is to wind at your natural speed and adjust your walking speed to suit. And the indicator for judging your walking speed is the amount of slack in the poly wire ahead. Too little slack and my winding will stall like this. I need to walk faster. Too much slack and I'm likely to get a wrap around my wrist like this. I need to walk slower. So look ahead and make sure that there is just a little bit of droop in the poly wire ahead of you, but not so much that the poly wire is touching the ground. When we first start, it's best to tip the spool forward so that the worst that can happen is the poly wire spills over the top like this. So forward and away we go. Now watch carefully as I flick the poly wire out of the clip and grab the tread-in with my left hand. Near the end, orbital winding is quite difficult, so it pays to walk the last few metres, pull the knot free, and wind the poly wire through your hand like this. To stop the poly wire from coming loose, just pull it down the side of the spool like this. Well, that's the simplest version of the dairy pack. Let's go and have a look at something a little more complicated.